You're listening to Spurscast, episode 664. My name is Paul Garcia, and I'm your host here on the Spurscast. Today, in this return episode of the Spurscast, I will be going solo to look at where the Spurs' roster currently stands in the offseason, and I'll also break down the schedule. Now, before we start discussing this episode, you all may be wondering, why has there not been a Spurscast in over a month? The reason for that is that we decided to take a little bit of a break. I'm going through a transition in my personal life where I actually moved locations, so I kind of had to move to different cities. That's one part of it. But then two, there hasn't been a lot of news. It's been the off season. We want to take a break as Project Spurs, and then we're gonna be coming now that we're back here with the Spurscast, and I got everything set up, ready to go. So let's jump right into this episode. Here we go. All right, so the first topic is the roster after 1 month. So again, it was back on, I believe it was like July 12th that I last recorded an episode. So there's been some changes to the Spurs' roster, currently. Now, before we go into the players, there's actually been some coaching updates with the team. A longtime assistant coach, shooting guru coach Chip Engelland has departed from the team. He's gone on to move to sign with the Oklahoma City Thunder as one of their new assistant coaches. So Chip Engelland, after 17 seasons with the Spurs, is no longer with the Spurs. He's now, you'll now see him when the Oklahoma City Thunder visit San Antonio, or when the Spurs go on the road over there. But the Spurs have brought back a familiar face in the coaching with the coaches, and that is Brett Brown, former head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. He's now back in San Antonio as an assistant coach with the Spurs. So again, Chip England's gone from the assistant coaching bench of Greg Popovich, and now Brett Brown is back after spending some seasons earlier in his career in San Antonio. So let's talk about where the roster currently stands. There's been some new additions in terms of players on the team. Gorgui Dieng officially signed his deal. He did sign a fully guaranteed 1-year minimum deal. So Gorgui Dieng is back in San Antonio. Dominic Barlow and Jordan Hall have both filled out the two-way roster spots. So now those two roster spots are completely full. And we've talked about Dominic Barlow here on the Spurscast before. He was the pick taken in the second round for San Antonio. He played a lot in the summer league. If you watch the Vegas games back in July. Jordan Hall was also on the summer league team. He's a 6'8" forward. So those two players will be going back and forth between San Antonio and Austin this coming season. And the Spurs last week just signed, or they haven't officially announced the deal yet, or it hasn't actually gone through on the transaction wire. But Alize Johnson was an unrestricted free agent. He has signed a non-guaranteed deal. Woj broke the news that the Spurs were going to sign him to a 1-year deal, but then Jeff McDonald of the San Antonio Express News did mention that it's a non-guaranteed deal. So this is most likely a training camp invite, because based on their roster construction right now, the Spurs do need to waive somebody at some point before the regular season starts. So now that we know exactly who's kind of been brought into the team, let's talk about where the roster currently stands, again, with about a month before training camp starts here. So the roster breakdown, the Spurs have 18 players on the roster, and they have 2 open spots left before training camp and the preseason. So again, they can still add 2 more players. So you may see them, Spurs reportedly agree to deal with so-and-so. If they do that, it's because they have 2 spots left. 13 players are guaranteed deals. So there are 13 players with guaranteed deals. Players have non-guaranteed deals, and that will be Trey Jones, who has a partially guaranteed deal for $500,000. Then they have Keita Bates-Diop, who has a non-guaranteed deal, and now they have Alize Johnson, who's on a non-guaranteed deal. Then the Spurs still have a qualifying offer out in restricted free agency on Joe Wieskamp. So the team can still try to bring him back if, on that qualifying offer, if Wieskamp were to accept that offer. But again, right now, there's not really there's 2 spots, yes, but like I said, one player will have to be waived from this roster before the regular season begins later on in October. So right now, yes, they can go into the preseason, into training camp first with 18 players on the roster, or even up to 20. And then they can play the whole preseason out. But then before the first game of the regular season on October 19th, the team does have to waive at least 1 player based on roster construction right now. So I guess, again, the players to watch are those players on non-guaranteed deals. That's Trey Jones. I think he's pretty safe right now, just because they've used him as an integral part off their bench in the past few seasons. They have Keita Bates-Diop, who's also gotten some minutes the last 2 years. And then they have Alize Johnson. So again, unless he really pops in the training camp and preseason, I don't know how certain it is that he makes the team. Another player to watch for, even though he's on a guaranteed deal, is Romeo Langford, because the fact that he was kind of injured when he got traded from Boston to San Antonio to end the season last year, But again, they have a lot of guards already on this roster, a lot of shooting guards specifically where he plays. And so they may want to give a lot of those minutes to the younger players who they just drafted, like Malachi Branham or maybe Blake Wesley. So again, even though, yes, Langford is on a guaranteed deal, I don't know, it wouldn't be surprising to me if the Spurs by the time the cut down date comes for rosters in October, if maybe they waive him, even though he's on a guaranteed deal, just because, again, it's going to be really tough for him to get a lot of playing time this coming season, especially that he's a veteran player. With all those young players coming onto the team. And then financially, where does the team stand? They still have a lot of cap space out there. They can open anywhere from like $23 million at minimum up to like $35 million in cap space. So even though, yes, their roster has 18 players, they're still one of those teams to watch that if a team wants to move on a veteran player, big contract, that there's been reports obviously in the offseason about the Lakers and Nets having interest in maybe swapping Kyrie Irving for Russell Westbrook. And if there's a third team needed, the Spurs could be that third team to take on Westbrook's contract. So again, right now, yes, the roster currently stands where it's at, but again, they have the flexibility with all that cap space to take in a veteran player. So again, that's something to watch as training camp draws closer toward the end of September. I believe it would start, even though they haven't officially given a date. So again, that's kind of where the Spurs' roster stand. I know that it's been a while, and again, we'll continue to report in over Project Spurs on what other additions they make or who leaves the team. So the next topic is let's go ahead and break down the Spurs' schedule. So this one I'm going to go ahead and display. So again, if you're listening to Spurscast, thank you for listening on all the different apps that we have it on. But then if you're also watching visually on YouTube, this part's at least going to help out. So let me just bring that up real quick because there's a lot of notes here. All right, so now if you're watching visually, you're able to see this, but I'll explain it to you, those of you just listening through audio. Okay, so the Spurs schedule breakdown. So the preseason does begin October 2nd through 13th. So October 2nd is the first game. So usually the training camp begins a week before the preseason. So I'm assuming that like in late September, maybe like early 20s is when they'll have media day, and then they'll start training camp, the Spurs. So the Spurs will play in 5 preseason games. Then up until October 13th, then they're going to get about 6 days off. And then the regular season does begin on October 19th officially. Their first opponent will be the Charlotte Hornets in San Antonio. And then they go for multiple months. I think it's like a 7-month season. And then their final game is on April 9th against the Dallas Mavericks. Now, because of where they're projected to be as a team this coming season, we know it's a rebuilding year, so they're likely not going to make the playoffs, likely not even make the play-in game unless they really surpass expectations. Then their season is expected to wrap up here on April 9th. So again, be ready for some Spurs basketball from probably October 19th through April 9th. The first 15 games is a really good indicator we're going to have to see exactly what this team is. Exactly, are they that lottery team that's projected to maybe get the best pick in the draft for Victor Wembanyama from France, or are they maybe more competitive and surprising people with the expectations? So let's just take a look at their first 15 games, because again, this will be a really good sample size once the season starts. So it's going to take place from October 19th through November 15th. This is about a good month into the season. And so I've written here, obviously the Vegas individual games haven't come out yet, but I've written here first, what teams are they favored or maybe even against or slightly the underdog against? And there's only 3 teams in these first 15 games that I can see that being the case. The Charlotte Hornets, maybe that's the case for that opponent, the Indiana Pacers, and also the Portland Trailblazers. So again, those are the 3 teams that I think, they may be even, they may be slightly favored, or they may just be a slight underdog. Now, these next, the next 12 teams are teams that they should not be favored. They should not be favored against. They're probably going to be, 4 to 6 points underdogs or even more against these opponents. And that is the Philadelphia 76ers, the Minnesota Timberwolves 3 times in the first 15 games. And remember, the Wolves just added Rudy Gobert, the Chicago Bulls, the Toronto Raptors, the Clippers, who are healthy, should have Kawhi Leonard back, or are expected to have him back. The Denver Nuggets twice, who are supposed to have Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., should be coming back as well. The Memphis Grizzlies, the Milwaukee Bucks, and then the Warriors, who just won the title. So again, those 15 games to start the year, if the Spurs, if everything goes kind of as it's projected to go, then they can end up starting the year 3-12. And again, that's kind of expected if this is a team that is expected to be the worst team in the league by record and have the best chance of getting the number 1 pick next offseason. So again, it's going to be a rough start if that's the case. So you kind of bear in mind that's what a rebuilding team looking to try to get the number 1 pick in the lottery looks like. That's the kind of season it has. But who knows? Maybe they make some surprises. Maybe they end up starting like 5-10, or, or even 5-10 is not that great. Just like I don't know, 7-8 or something like that. So maybe they will be a little bit more surprising. So again, that first 15 games will tell us exactly what projection this team is headed toward. And so that's going to be interesting to look at when the season does start again, a month into the season. Now let's just go through a few schedule highlights here that I noticed, kind of picking apart the schedule. They do have an early 5-game road trip in mid-November. They're going to go to Golden State. They're going to go to Portland, Sacramento, and then visit the Clippers and Lakers. So again, that'll be an early 5-game road trip for the team. As far as holidays, there's no games on Halloween. There's no games on Christmas Day, and there are no games on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in January. They do have a game on New Year's Eve, and that's against the Dallas Mavericks. So there is one game on New Year's Eve. The rodeo road trip is very long for them. It's a 9-game road trip this year. It's going to start in early February, February 6th, and it goes all the way through the end of February, February 28th. Now, the All-Star break does take place during that road trip. So again, it's not solely that they're on the road for 9 games. They do get to take a break there in between. And so the way that the opponents they're going to play during the road trip are the Chicago Bulls, the Toronto Raptors, the Detroit Pistons, the Atlanta Hawks, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Hornets again, the Dallas Mavericks, and then the Jazz twice. So again, that rodeo road trip is a 9-game road trip in February, like the norm, but that's very long, a 9-game road trip. Let's talk about some players, some former Spurs that they're going to see this season. The first game where they're going to actually play against DeJounte Murray, who just got traded back in, I think it was July or late. Yeah, it was July. Their first game against Murray in Atlanta will be during that rodeo road trip on February 11th. So again, that's when they get to see DeJounte Murray, their former teammate, former All-Star on the team. And then Murray makes his return to San Antonio not until March 19th. So again, Murray will visit San Antonio, be back in the AT&T Center on March 19th. Lonnie Walker IV was also a key player for the Spurs these last few years. He's now with the Los Angeles Lakers. So the first matchup against Lonnie will take place on November 20th in LA against the Lakers. And then Lonnie will make his return pretty early into the season against the Spurs. He'll come back on right close to Thanksgiving on November 25th. So again, Lonnie visits San Antonio on November 25th. And then even though he wasn't, we know that he got traded last season, Derek White never actually played against the Spurs once he got traded to Boston. So his first game against San Antonio's former team will be, as a Celtic, will be on January 7th in San Antonio. So again, Derek White will make his return to the AT&T Center now that he's a member of the Celtics. And then there are, those games that they mentioned a lot here, on the media and just in headlines. And that's those 3 separate location games that are considered home games for the Spurs. The first one does take place in Mexico City against the Miami Heat. It's on December 17th, and it is going to be broadcast on NBA TV. So that's one of their national games, the Spurs. Then the Spurs will stay in San Antonio, but they're going to go visit their old home, the Alamo Dome, against the Golden State Warriors on January 13th. And this is their only ESPN game of the season. So that game will be broadcast on ESPN. And again, they're trying to try to get try to break some record for the most fans in attendance. So they're really promoting that game in January on ESPN in the Alamo Dome. And then not until toward the end of the season, literally the second to last game of the year, they're going to play the Minnesota Timberwolves in Austin at the Moody Center. And so so again, it's a Spurs home game, but they'll be playing the Wolves there in Austin again at the Moody Center. It's on April 8th. And I know that, when all this reporting first came out, a lot of people got, kind of upset that the Spurs are playing some games in Austin, especially, that's the closest city, where they have a lot more promotional stuff going on as well with the Spurs, and they have the Austin Spurs there. And then it was Mike Finger of the Express News. I saw a tweet from him recently where he was like, there was all that stuff about the Austin game, but then, that game is not until the second to last game of the year. And again, at that point, it's pretty much like the Wolves are probably getting ready for the playoffs. So they're going to probably be resting all their players. The Spurs are probably going to be trying to get the best lottery odds. So they probably won't, be a winning club by that point. So again, it's not going to be that great of a game to watch. I would say if for that being, one of the marquee games where they're going to be on the road. Something else notable is that there are going to be 5 bobblehead nights for different Spurs legends. So on one night you can get a bobblehead of George Gervin if you go. Another night David Robinson. Another night Tim Duncan. Manu Ginobili also has a bobblehead coming out, and then also a Tony Parker night. So again, you can the schedule's all online on the Spurs' website, but also you can see it. We wrote about it on Project Spurs. So again, there's those bobblehead nights if you're able to make those games in attendance in San Antonio. And then, this is a tough one for the Spurs is now that they're considered to be the worst team on paper going into a season, they do end up showing that they're going to have the most likely the hardest schedule in the league. And again, that's mainly based when you look at who has the hardest schedule in the league. It's a lot of times it's always the top 5 hardest team schedules are the teams projected to have the worst records, just because they don't have the players and the competitiveness. I mean, they have competitiveness, you know what I mean? Like they don't have the players on the roster coming in on paper that are projected to have a really good winning season. So the Spurs, according to Positive Residual, do have the hardest schedule in the NBA. The strength of schedule for the opponents is 52.1%. So again, that's a hard schedule for the Spurs, and again, it's mainly based on the roster that they've put together so far this offseason. So again, that's kind of where the schedule stands. It's going to be an interesting season. Again, it's meant to be a rebuilding year. The Spurs are trying, they're going to try to basically develop the young players that they have on the roster. They have 3 rookies coming in with Sohan, Malachi Branham, and also Blake Wesley. Who knows if even the Austin guys get a lot of minutes? Maybe like Dominic Barlow gets a lot of minutes in San Antonio. Maybe Jordan Hall. So again, that's kind of the season that's expected. They do have some veteran players, and as we've discussed here in the past, we don't know how long those veteran players will remain on the team this season. Players like Jakob Poeltl, Doug McDermott, a few others. So again, it's just going to be an interesting season to watch. Based on the projections, that's kind of where things stand. It's going to be for a competitive standpoint, it's going to be interesting to see again how close are the Spurs in these games, or do they just completely fall out based not having an all-star anymore, like and having a leader like DeJounte Murray. We'll see who picks up that responsibility in the younger players or veteran players. Before we close out this episode, don't forget to visit projectspurs.com. We have our latest articles on Jakob Poeltl. We've also added some new writers. I do want to mention that as well over on Project Spurs. So you'll start to see more of their work, especially as the season draws closer. So we have an article on Jakob Poeltl. It's written by Balin Ganeshipa. We have a new statement jerseys article by Matt Lerma. And then Jonas Clark wrote about the schedule release, so you can check that out on Project Spurs. We have our Fiesta short series that was that's written by Trace Ronning. So again, he's one of our new writers as well. And then of course, Benjamin Bornstein is getting ready for next year's draft, and he has a bunch of articles on the prospects for the 2023 draft. So make sure to check out Ben's work, especially the fact that this is supposed to be a team that's projected to be a top 5 lottery team, actually top 3 lottery team based on the roster they put together. So thanks for listening to this episode of the Spurscast, and also thank you to Joe Garcia for mixing and producing this episode. From all of us at Project Spurs, stay safe and have a great day.